It's the morning star drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, you know. I'm on the morning star drive, you know.
Hey guys, it's Tuesday, December 15th. This is the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. We're on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. Now, today we will get some coronavirus updates, current news from around the world, the best class ever segment from Sean Jusung McMillan, and looking into the book of Thessalonians. So, everyone, how are you guys doing today? I hope you guys are enjoying your week. Guys, Monday's already done. So we're ready and fully into the week. So I'm really thankful you guys have joined us here on the Morning Star Drive. Keep liking, commenting, and want to hear from you guys and see how you're doing. Last Sunday edition, have you guys seen it yet? We met Seungmin Jung from America, Face star that is holding the fort down over there in San Francisco as the head leader. Incredible story of his journey into this history and also coming into leadership, guys. Great interview. Hope you guys, those of you who've already seen it, I know you've enjoyed it. So let's make sure to check out the Sunday edition this week. All right, so let's get this show started. Let's get this show started on the road. Who is today's featured artist on this awesome Tuesday? It is none other than Star Aiden Verity from New Zealand, one of the OGs of songwriting here in this history. We're going to hear the song called Believe in Me. Second song from the Paper Music Associates in Korea. This song's from J Root, and this song is called Latte featuring St. Green. And last but not least, it is Diawings, also from Korea, and this song, great song, is called Do Not Block This Way. So as usual, guys, let's make sure to listen to these awesome member artists from around the world. Great music that they're producing and making, but most importantly, let's make sure we pray for them. Pray for their music to spread around the world.
She can't see to the future. No matter how hard she tries, a piece of heaven chipped off and fell to her. But it's so heavy to carry. Some call it a dream or a heartache, 'cause it's so hard to believe in. Till I can say I believe in me. How long till I can say I believe in me? How long till I can say I believe in me? How long till I can say I believe in? I've been staring at the girl in that picture. She doesn't know who to be. When people say the world is your oyster, it's not any easier to see. Another day and I'm starting to wonder if I'll ever know what it means. A teary-eyed hustling dreamer, find it so hard to believe in me. How long till I can say I believe in? How long till I can say I believe in? How long till I can say I believe in? How long till I can say I believe in me?
밤이 올 수 없게 오늘은 잠이 들 수 없네 Stay awake 한 잔의 라떼 oh yeah. Cause I need a cafe 오늘은 밤이 올 수 없게 그럴 수밖에 오늘은 잠이 들 수 없네 Stay awake 깨어 있어야 해 필요한 건 각성상태 피로감은 누적이 돼 내일을 죽기는 주적이 돼 벌써 몇 시간째야 만큼한 것 같아 아니 나 오늘 막차 아니 저 차를 Sweet little bit Sweet little bit Sweet little bit 쓴 거 싫으니까 쓴 거 싫으니까 Give me a minute babe Me a minute give me a minute babe 짙은 밤 하늘에 Milky Way 한 잔의 라떼 oh yeah Cause I need a cafe 오늘은 밤이 올 수 없게 그럴 수밖에 오늘은 잠이 들 수 없네 Stay awake 잠깐만 날 좀 있게 해줘 어제가 날 붙잡지 않게 해줘 Let me go now 그럴 수밖에 잠이 들 수 없네 Couple latte Stay awake Sipping 먹기 전에 나와 지금은 조금은 달라 Sleeping to it softly 기분 좋은 작은 다른 건 신경 쓰지 않아 Flipping Cynical too much sarcasm 가라른 미리 부드러운 느낌이 쓰라림에 지친 나는 외로워해주네 Can you feel me now You feel me now You feel me now 룸 위로 나 저기까지 갈 수 있게 되는 것 가져 저기 Be there till break of dawn 나 때는 말야 wow. 입내지만 너 화면이 쌓여 침묵은 닮은 새고 밤을 새봐도 쌓이는 problem 빙빙 도는 내 몸 뻥 뚫린 내 홈 몇 번을 해 너 봐야 했어 다짐에 이게 마지막 no 한 잔의 라떼 oh yeah. Cause I need a cafe 오늘은 밤이 올 수 없게 그럴 수밖에 오늘은 잠이 들 수 없네 Stay awake 잠깐만 날 좀 있게 해줘 어제가 날 붙잡지 않게 해줘 Let me go now 그럴 수밖에 잠에 들 수 없네 Couple latte Stay awake Stay awake
그만큼 해봤음 상관없어 그만큼 해봤담 너 돌 던져도 돼 Do not block this way Do not block this way 그만큼 해봤음 상관없어 그만큼 해봤담 너 돌 던져도 돼 Do not block this way Do not block this way With my God 천국에 푹 빠진 삶 누가 뭐래도 사랑의 폭살 맞아버린 삶 가치를 알아야 같이 살지 마치 하나의 몸과 같이 늘 대면하는 축복만큼 큰 건 없어 정신을 차리면 그 속안을 다 볼 수 있어 그만큼 해봤음 상관없어 그만큼 해봤담 너 돌 던져도 돼 자 이제 별들아 일어나 소리쳐봐 우린 everyday's real party We have nothing to hide, nothing can prevent us easy 불신뿐인 정신은 답이 없어 nothing 우린 진리란 신을 신고 매신의 경지에 올라 막을 테면 여기 올라와 떳떳하게 막아봐 말할 테면 어디 숨지만 똑바로 보고 말해 네가 봤다는 그거 너 들었다
that was Dia Wings from Korea. That song is Do Not Block This Way. I'm not sure if you guys know that was originally a song from way back in the first half of history. Like, I used to sing that song, but like the old Korean folk song version of it, it went, it says like, do not block this way. That's like the pop version they made. But the old one is, it goes like, in English, it's like, why do you block? Why do you block the person of the na na na? Why do you? That's what it used to sound like, guys. It was like an old folk song, right? Or it was done in an old way in the past, back in the in 1998, 99, even up to like 2002. It was all it was the old version of it. But I'm really happy that they made a pop song out of this one. The other one was really difficult to sing, but that was Do Not Block This Way. Before that was J Root from Paper Music Associates in Korea. That song was Latte featuring Saint Green. And guess what, guys? Paper Music Associates, new song just came out today. No, came out yesterday, actually. So I will play that song for the Wednesday podcast. And of course, the feature artist of the day was Juice Star Aiden Verdi from New Zealand, and that song is Believe in Me. So let's get into some coronavirus updates for today. Well, these are all from yesterday. In the world, 72.6 million cases with 1.6 million deaths, and the mortality rate is at 2.23%, remains steady there. Look at country by country. Top 6 countries going by 24-hour infection rates. The U.S. with 16.7 million cases, 306,000 deaths at 1.83%. They remain the same. India, 9.8 million cases, 143,000 deaths at 1.45%. Brazil, 6.9 million cases, 181,000 deaths at 2.63%. Then Russia at 2.6 million cases, 46,000 deaths at 1.77%. The UK in 5th with 1.8 million cases, 64,000 deaths at 3.47%, and Turkey rounding up the top 6 with 1.8 million cases, 16,000 deaths at 0.89%. Sweden, one of the only countries not going into a full-blown lockdown, is down to 2.35%, and Belgium remains at 2.95%, which is great news because Belgium was going up, and we were expecting them to go to like 3% by the end of the week. Let's take a look at the daily infection rates, top 6 countries. U.S., number 1 country with 187,000 cases in a day with a 1% increase. Russia in second with 28,000 cases at 1%. India with 27,000 cases, and then Turkey with 26,000 cases at 1%. Brazil at 21,000 cases, and in the UK rounds of the top 6 with 18,000 cases in a day with a 1% increase. All the way over here in Southeast Asia, Indonesia stays above 6,100 cases in a day. And then Malaysia in second with 1,200 cases in a day. And of course, the Philippines with 1,000 cases, which is good news. I hope Philippines drops below 1,000 cases also. So that brings us into the current news for today around the world. A couple things going on. Sunday was supposed to be the last day for the Brexit trade talks between the UK and EU. However, both sides have agreed to go the extra mile in effort to agree on a new deal. So the UK and the EU have agreed to carry on post-Brexit trade talks after a call between leaders earlier on Sunday. So in a joint statement, Boris Johnson and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said it was responsible at this point to go the extra mile. So the pair are discussing the major unresolved topics during their call, and the two sides have said Sunday was the deadline for a decision on whether to continue with talks, with the UK set to leave the EU at the end of December. But they agreed to tell negotiators to carry on talks in Brussels to see whether an agreement can even at this late stage be reached. And they didn't say how long these talks would continue, but the ultimate deadline is December 31st, and time must be allowed for the UK and European Parliament to vote on any deal that emerges. So the president for the EU, Mrs. von der Leyen, said Sunday's call with Mr. Johnson had been constructive and useful, but Mr. Johnson, or Boris Johnson from the UK, repeated his warning from earlier in the week that a no-deal scenario was most likely. So the UK and EU have been carrying out negotiations for a post-Brexit trade deal since March and are attempting to secure one before the so-called transition period end on December 31st, when the two sides would move to trading on the World Trade Organization rules. So without a trade deal, tariffs and, charges on goods being bought and sold between the two sides could be introduced, and in turn, prices on certain products may go up. And there are two key sticking points preventing an agreement: competition rules and fishing rights, and negotiators will now continue to sort these issues out. And speaking from the Commission in Brussels, there was a joint statement for the EU saying, despite the exhaustion after almost a year of negotiations, despite the fact that deadlines have been missed over and over, we think it is responsible at this point to go the extra mile. So hopefully something happens by December 31st for the Brexit deal of the UK leaving the EU. Also, for coronavirus in the pandemic news, we have South Korea sees a record rise in daily cases, and South Korea has recorded a new high in the number of coronavirus cases, with 950 infections announced on Saturday. And of course, the president said the country was facing an emergency situation and vowed to strengthen testing and tracing in response. And basically, this is the last hurdle before the rollout of vaccines and treatments, the president said. And most of the new cases have been in the capital of Seoul and the surrounding areas. The region is home to around half of South Korea's population. So in recent days, the country has recorded between 500, 600 new daily infections. And earlier this week, or last week, South Korea raised its level of alert amid a third wave of cases. So new measures, which came into effect on last week Tuesday, include a ban on gatherings of more than 50 people. Gyms and karaoke bars have been closed, while restaurants are only allowed to offer deliveries after 9 p.m. local time. However, the government has warned that restrictions could be raised to the highest level, which would see gatherings limited to 10 people, schools closed, and all but essential roles working from home. So South Korea has recorded more than 41,000 cases, 578 deaths since the pandemic began. The country initially saw a huge spike in infections in February after a religious group in the city of Daegu was identified as a virus cluster, which was a Shincheonji church. And unlike many countries in Europe and elsewhere, however, the South Korean government has avoided nationwide lockdowns and has instead focused its efforts to contain the virus on testing and contact tracing. Now, on to big news for me. Okay, this is news that, I was thinking like, whoa, I need one more piece of news, and I saw this news and it's gonna affect me a lot. Okay, basically, in South America, there's no pickers for coffee beans, which means if there's no pickers, there's no coffee, and this is how the coronavirus can threaten Colombia's harvest. And yes, I am an avid coffee lover. Basically, anyone could blackmail me or entice me into doing something for a latte. I don't know why, it's just in my head for some reason, okay? So for almost 4 decades, the Santa Isabel estate has been growing coffee and roasting it on its premises. And this is in Colombia, right? And production could fall this year at this massive farm, which covers a steep mountain that is almost entirely carpeted with coffee bushes. Coffee pickers have become harder to hire because of the coronavirus pandemic. Low prices for beans means there's not much money to lure more workers by offering higher wages. So, if you can't get more workers, you could lose some of the crops, right? And these are what some of the farms managers are saying, the coffee farm managers are saying, and the beans are going to fall off and they're going to rot because they're not picked. And he says, right now there's a crew of 50 people making, I was watching this video, a crew of 50 people making their way up a slope covered in 6 feet tall, coffee bushes, right? So this province in Colombia needs around 32,000 coffee pickers from other parts of the country each year to collect its harvest, which is the harvest is September to December, but currently they are short 7,000 coffee pickers. So according to Colombia's National Federation of Coffee Growers, they are very, very light on workers, and there's going to be similar labor shortages affected the coffee farms in Costa Rica this year also. So what's at risk? What's the risk? Well, it's because of the coronavirus, right? So that fewer people are showing up because the job has become riskier, right? To prevent outbreaks and make the job safer for coffee pickers, farms in Colombia have taken biosecurity measures that include adding hand washing stations and temperature checks. Some of the larger farms have also expanded their dormitories or added tents so that their workers are more spaced out, with their bunk beds now placed 2 meters apart. So at a lot of these places, in these farms, many of the coffee pickers who turned out this year are mainly Venezuelan because of the economy that's crashing over there. So Venezuelans are coming into Colombia to pick coffee beans because the monthly minimum wage right now is about $1 in Venezuela. So that's why they are coming over to Colombia to pick beans and send money over back to Venezuela. Last but not least, just last one is coronavirus news in Germany. and they will go into lockdown after Christmas. So they're going to go into hard lockdowns after the Christmas period as the numbers of deaths and infections of the coronavirus reach record levels. So non-essential shops will be closed all across the country from Wednesday. Schools and children to be cared for at home wherever possible. So Angela Merkel, which is a chancellor, blamed Christmas shopping for a considerable rise in social contacts. So the latest figures show about 20,000 more infections and further 321 more deaths. And the new lockdown will run from December 16th to January 10th. And announcing the move after meeting leaders of the country's 16 states. Angela Merkel said there was an urgent need to take action. Restaurants, bars, leisure centers have already been closed since November, and some areas of the country had imposed their own lockdowns. So under this national lockdown, essential shops such as foods will stay open, and banks can stay open too, and outlets selling Christmas trees can also continue trading. Hair salons are among the businesses that have to close. Okay, so basically the latest official figures show that, there's 1.3 million cases and 21,000 deaths, right in Germany right now. So that's what's going on over there with coronavirus in this second or third wave, whatever you'd call it. But yes, of course, the most important news for me today is definitely the coffee beans. I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's get into a time of praise and worship today, guys. This is a week of Thanksgiving and giving glory to the Holy Trinity. So what are we going to sing today? We're going to sing, we're going to get some new songs that have come out in English, new songs that have been made. First is called Let's Make God and the Holy Spirit Rejoice. Great, fast, upbeat song. Then we'll go into the Golden Time. And then last but not least, we will break it down to Heard in God's Ears. So everyone, let's spend this time together giving glory to the Holy Trinity.
Surely rejoice. Everyone clap all together. Everyone sing. Everyone get on your feet and dance. God and the Holy Spirit will surely rejoice.
Time for larger purposes and a short time for a smaller purpose, then it will work out. Time is like money, spend it well. If it's used wrong, longer times on smaller tasks. With the time that's left to you, you can accomplish big things. First think, is this task big, is it small? Spend your time the best way, your time is like gold. For a small task, gather bits of time, and like lightning get the work done. For a large task, dedicate time, spend time to finish it up. Use your time well, like it's gold, then you'll surely succeed. Treasure your time, use your main time valuably. Use your main time on a large important work, then you will succeed. This is the method. How do you spend pieces of your golden time? Use time and win, lose time and fail. Save up and value each moment, then value your time, value it like your life. Use a long time for larger purposes and a short time for a smaller purpose, then it will work out. Time is like money, spend it well. If it's used wrong, longer times on smaller tasks, with the time that's left to you, you can accomplish big things. First think, is this task big, is it small? Spend your time the best way, your time is like gold. For a small task, gather bits of time, and like lightning get the work done. For a large task, dedicate time, spend time to finish it up. Use your time well, like it's gold, then you'll surely succeed. Treasure your time, use your main time valuably. Use your main time on a large important work, then you will succeed. This is the method. How do you spend pieces of your golden time? Use time and win, lose time and fail. Save up and value each moment, then value your time, value it like your life. Use time and win, lose time and fail. Save up and value each moment, then value your time, value it like your life.
When we hear the word of God, when we realize and take action, all our deeds become words heard in God's ears. He receives our actions, all the things we've done, all the words the Savior speaks, they are secrets from above. I will value every word and act to make them mine. My God, I know the value with every action I take. I'll proclaim the words I love you to the Trinity. Hear the confession of my deeds. I reflect upon your word. Please receive my earnest heart, O Trinity. Through the world God created, through the things we go through in our lives. We receive inspiration from heaven. God sends us the Spirit and strength so we can run. All the words the Savior speaks, they are secrets from above. I will value every word and act to make them mine. My God, I know the value with every action I take. I'll proclaim the words I love you to the Trinity. Hear the confession of my deeds. I will act upon your word. Please receive my earnest heart, O Trinity. My God, I know the value with every action I take. I'll proclaim the words I love you to the Trinity. Hear the confession of my deeds. I will act upon your word. Please receive my earnest heart, O Trinity. Oh God, receive my love. May my actions be the words that reach your ears.
And that was Heard in God's Ears. I hope you guys enjoyed singing that song together, giving glory to the Holy Trinity. Before that was Golden Time. And of course, first time we've had it on the Morning Star Drive is Let's Make God and the Holy Spirit Rejoice. All right. So that's going to move us into a time of word study. And this week, of course, we went back into Psalms about thanksgiving and glory. But we also went into the book of Thessalonians, First Thessalonians. Okay. So I'm going to just kind of do a word study on the book of Thessalonians, particularly the first one. But I'll give you a kind of background and dating of where this all came from. Okay, so the book of Thessalonians was said to be written by Paul. Okay, and there is a lot of evidence, both external evidence outside of the Bible and internal evidence inside the Bible that support the view that Paul wrote the book of Thessalonians, and he wrote it while he was in Corinth. Okay, so most of the early church writers are, they agree on this matter with testimonies beginning as early as like 140, AD 140. Okay, that Paul's known characteristics are apparent in the letters, and if you start comparing them with, like, say, the book of Acts and 2 Corinthians, you can just see that Paul's writings, his characteristics are there. Historical allusions in the book fit Paul's life as recounted in Acts and in his own letters. You can compare that in other chapters of Acts, like chapter 2 and 17. And in the face of such evidence, not many people have ever rejected the authorship of the book of Thessalonians from Paul. Okay, generally they date it around. This was written around AD 50 to 52, around AD 51, around there. And there's a lot of weighty support for this date, and it's found in an inscription discovered in Delphi, Greece. Okay, and that dates Gallio's proconsulship, so he's one of the leaders there, and places Paul at Corinth at the same time. Okay, so except for the possibility of an early date for Galatians, First Thessalonians is Paul's earliest canonical letter. Okay, we're not sure about Galatians though. It's possibly could have been written earlier, but they say that Paul's first letter is First Thessalonians that he wrote. Okay, so Thessalonica is the area. First Thessalonians are the people that live in Thessalonica. What's with the city and the church there? Thessalonica, bustling seaport city at the head of the Thermaic Gulf, important communication and trade center located at the junction of the Great Egnatian Way and the road leading north to the Danube. Okay, it was the largest city in Macedonia and was also the capital of its province. So the background of the Thessalonian church is found in Acts chapter 17. Right, since Paul began his ministry there in the Jewish synagogue, it is reasonable to assume that the new church included some Jews. Okay, in Thessalonica, right? But if you look in like chapter 1 and Acts chapter 17, it seems to indicate that the church was largely Gentile in membership. There were Jews, but largely Gentile membership. What's the purpose of these books? Paul left Thessalonica abruptly, and you'll find that in Acts chapter 17. And after a rather brief stay, and then a lot of recent converts, they came in from paganism, and they were left with little external support in the midst of persecution, right? So Paul's getting persecuted right away. Okay, so Paul's purpose in writing this letter was to encourage the new converts in their trials, to give instruction concerning godly living, and to give assurance concerning the future of believers who die before Christ returns, right? So you got to know that the situation is he had to leave abruptly, but he just finished evangelizing tons of people from paganism, and then now they were left like they were abandoned children. So that's why he's writing this letter. The theme of the book in Thessalonians is basically like the letter is kind of, the purpose is, there's multiple themes in it, but there is the subject of eschatology, or the doctrine of last days, the end times. It seems to be the predominant theme in both letters, in First and Second Thessalonians, and every chapter of First Thessalonians ends with a reference to the second coming of Christ. Right? So, chapter 4, giving it major consideration. The second coming seems to be the most important thing in the letter, and may be viewed in some sense as its theme. So the two letters are often designated as the eschatological letters of Paul. Right? So these two letters, 1st, 2nd Thessalonians, are about the last times. Okay? So, yes, the subject of the last days is like the main thing in both the letters. And every chapter of 1 Thessalonians ends with a reference to the second coming of Christ. Every chapter. Okay? So the second coming seems to permeate the letter and may be viewed in some sense as its theme. And the two letters are often designated as, like I said, once again, it is the last days, the eschatological letters of Paul. Right? For those of you who don't know how they kind of went to Thessalonica to preach, it was Paul, Silas, and Timothy. Right, and they were the first to share the gospel in Thessalonica, and many Jews and Gentiles came to believe and follow Jesus, but of course it seems like the majority are Gentiles, and very quickly Paul and the others faced massive persecution and even violent danger from the Jewish community there, right? So Paul was forced to leave the city prematurely. Right? And of course, when we're talking about, Paul was really concerned for these new converts. So that's why he sent Timothy to them a few months later, who brought back a good report to them, to Paul, brought back a good report to Paul. And the report did relay some big questions and problems the church faced. And in this letter, Paul is addressing those issues. Okay, so you see how this letter was written. He went in there, Paul, Silas, and Timothy went in, and then they converted lots of Jews and Gentiles, and then they left because of the persecution from the Jewish community. And then he sent Timothy there by himself to figure out what's going on over there. He got all the issues, and he received them from Timothy, and then he wrote the letter to send to answer all those questions. Right? So the questions were most likely relating to the timing and meaning of Jesus' return. This is why the letters were very, very focused on the second coming and what happens to believers who die before Jesus' return, and how believers should live as they wait for that day. So Paul's letter mentions the coming of Jesus in every chapter and shows how Paul connected Christian hope with everyday living. Okay, so that is kind of what is going on with the two letters of, the two epistles that Paul wrote to the church in Thessalonica. And we know that the main theme for both of them was the Lord's second coming. And it's most likely because those are the main questions that they had more than anything else. And that's why when Timothy went to go check on them, all the questions were kind of pertaining more towards the Lord's second coming. Okay, so that is today's word study on the book of Thessalonica. The book of Thessalonians, to the church in Thessalonica. Okay, so that brings us into today's song of choice, and I'm going to go back not old school. This is we're going to go back to 2011, so it's not too far away. One of the most successful albums for someone from my hometown. His name is Michael Bublé. Okay, he is from Vancouver. Okay, so he's from Vancouver, and this is his seventh studio album called Christmas, And this was probably his highest selling album, released in October of 2011. It is the Christmas album, and the song we're going to hear to get ourselves back into some Christmas cheer is Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light. From now on, our troubles will be out of sight. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. From now on, our troubles will be miles away. As in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who are dear to us, gather near to us once more. Through the years, we all will be together if the fates allow. Hang a shining star upon the highest bough, and have yourself a merry little Christmas now. Faithful friends who are dear to us, gather near to us once more. Through the years, we all will be together if the fates allow. So hang a shining star above the highest bough, yourself a merry little Christmas now.
Tell me, guys, it feels a little bit more like Christmas, doesn't it? Ooh, all right, awesome. So that was Michael Bublé from Canada, from Vancouver, and that song from his Christmas album in 2011, that is Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Yeah. All right, so that brings us into the last segment of today, and today's last segment is none other than the best class ever from Sean Jusung McMillan. I hope that you guys will enjoy this as I thoroughly do each and every time. Just new things to think about, new awesome, just new information, new knowledge, and new wisdom, and I hope that all of us here too will be able to utilize this when we speak with newcomers or with each other also. All right, so this is the best class ever.
My name is Sean Jung-Ju-Song McMillan, and this is the best class ever. Last week, we learned about the idea of a philosopher king constructed by the Greek philosophers and the unethical machinations of a Machiavellian prince constructed by an Italian philosopher. Socrates pointed out that democracies don't necessarily promote the best leaders, and Machiavelli pointed out that virtues don't always lead to success. Ultimately, we can see how this played out in history through Shakespeare's historical dramas. Today, we will take a look at Shakespeare's young Christian leaders, one of his most tragic, Hamlet, and one of his most successful young leaders, King Henry V. Hamlet, another of Shakespeare's famous conflicted protagonists, also finds himself caught between the classical virtue of heroic valor versus the Christian virtue of thoughtfulness. On one hand, he feels immense pressure to fulfill his duty as a son and avenge the injustice of his father's murder. But he must also consider the eternal consequences of his momentary actions. He cannot escape through suicide because Christianity would damn his own immortal soul. At the midpoint crisis of the play, he finally gets a chance to kill his father's betrayer, but finds his guilty uncle at a moment of prayer and repentance. What will the uncle's eternal fate be if he is murdered at a moment of earnestness? There's so much more to consider in this Christian world. Should Hamlet be a man in the classical sense and fulfill his duties as a son, or should he respect the sanctity of life at risk of eternal damnation? Justice, murder, revenge, and suicide all take on conflicting shapes as we perceive them through these various conflicting philosophies. Ultimately, Hamlet is a tragic figure because he is damned if he takes action and damns everyone nonetheless when he fails to take action. To be or not to be. In other words, is it better to live or to die? That is the question. Or more crudely put, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Shakespeare explored these contradictory ideas, and our greatest stories today are still contending with these conflicting values. Whether it be the conflict between traditional Judeo-Christian values versus humanism, or whether it be the conflict between science versus religion, or the fight between the competing values of equality versus a meritocracy. A good story might provide a solid case for one side against the other, but a great story makes a great case for deeply necessary qualities of both sides, as well as their inherent contradictions. It forces us to contend with the paradox of the human situation. Of all the political leaders dramatized by Shakespeare, his greatest example of what can be described as a good leader is King Henry V. Shakespeare created several English history plays, and his first 4 plays culminate in the rule of King Henry V, who was able to unite England, Wales, and Scotland and marry into the French kingdom. There is a really great film on Netflix that I highly recommend, loosely based on the historical King Henry V and Shakespeare's version of King Henry V. I love this story because it shows just how difficult it is to be a great leader. King Henry, or Hal as he is known in his younger days, despises the court and tries to avoid the flatterers and the politics near the throne. He sees how suspicious and distrustful his father, King Henry IV, is of both enemies and allies. Hal spends time intermingling with soldiers, peasants, and friends as a juvenile delinquent. His father suddenly finds himself ill and surrounded by enemies and constantly at civil war, and worried that he will have to leave his throne to an irresponsible heir. But as soon as he dies, Hal does an about-face. He declares that though he is young, and despite how irresponsible he seemed, he will now do his best to be a great king. But even if he desires to be a wise king, and considers the counsel of those with more experience than himself, he finds it nearly impossible to tell the difference between good advice and flattery. This is why Machiavelli wrote his book, The Prince. Remember, he asked, is it better for a king to be loved or feared? Shakespeare's other kings became tragic because they were either too strong and unable to find peace, or too peaceful and unable to defend themselves against the stronger noble lords under their reign. Ultimately, King Henry V is able to do both when called for. He can be cruel and decisive when necessary, but also merciful and deliberate when decisions require discernment. He decides to unite the different factions within his kingdom by invading the French. but he himself does not publicly initiate the idea. Instead, he secretly negotiates with the church leaders to have them propose the idea publicly, if he promises not to seize the lands belonging to the church. This way, he can keep up the appearance of his Christian humility without appearing too ambitious. The time he spent as a youth in bars interacting with lowly peasants proves useful as he is able to lead his armies himself into battle. He knows their dialect, their slang, and knows how to raise their spirits. He is surprisingly Christian when he needs to be, but he can also play the classic pagan hero when necessary. He's cunning and logical behind the scenes, speaks ambitiously about valor before his army, is swift to punish disobedience when necessary, and is able to put all of his violence aside once he achieves peace. The dialogue in the play reveals just how crazy it is to have these crazy, thumotic virtues of classical heroes mixed with Christian values. One of his soldiers even cries out, "I would have blowed up the town, so Christ save me." Here he is both speaking in the Lord's name and exclaiming that he would have killed them all, completely unaware of just how bizarre the juxtaposition of these two statements are. King Henry V himself, when giving a speech to raise the spirits of his soldiers before marching into battle, exclaims, "Such outward things dwell not in my desire. But if it be a sin to covet honor, I am the most offending soul alive." There is nothing rational about risking your life in battle. Erotic love is the furthest thing from the battlefield, and it certainly will not satisfy one's appetites for life. If the king wants to motivate his men, he must appeal to thumos, man's desire for honor and glory. King Henry V knows better than to make an appeal to Christian virtues like love, patience, and mercy. Unlike Christ, he does not want his soldiers to love their enemies, and he is not even pretending to be humble. Yet even here, he uses Christian religious language boasting about sin, coveting, and having an offending soul. It's contradictory at best, but just like his soldier who said he'd blow up the town, Christ save me, the irony seems lost on him. A Christian warrior. But that's the funny thing about people. We are all walking contradictions. We believe in one thing, but often fail to act it out. Shakespeare's play about King Henry V is not a tragedy. It's a comedy. Not exactly because it's funny, but because it has a happy ending. It is filled with political power plays, war, but ultimately it ends with a marriage, not death. Ultimately, what helps King Hal to navigate this minefield of potentially tragic disasters is his ability to act like a heroic warrior when going to war, and successfully make the drastic switch to a benevolent Christian king once he achieves peace. Macbeth's strength was perfect for war, but he brought that warlike aggression into his own ranks after achieving peace, which ended in tragedy. Hamlet wasn't decisive when he needed to be, and far too overly introspective when he needed to take action. King Henry V was not an absolutist like Shakespeare's tragic leaders, but able to change from one extreme to another according to the needs of the situation. Practical like his father, King Henry IV, but without the suspicions of a usurper. Well-spoken and regal like King Richard II, but willing to lead his men into war instead of relying on his nobles. And because King Henry V had avoided the court in his early days, he knew better than to be influenced by flatterers and corruption. He had the education of a prince, but he also knew how to drink and speak the slang of the common people. So if you yourself want to be a great leader, which model would you follow? Would you rather be a philosopher king, a Machiavellian prince, or Shakespeare's comedian? But even if you don't want to be a leader, I'm sure we all love great movies about great kings. So I highly suggest you watch the film titled The King on Netflix this week, and let us know what you think. The film features Timothée Chalamet as King Henry V, and I'll post a link to the trailer in the notes. The other reason I like King Henry V is the plot comes down to one really critical decision in which the king must put everything on the line. Now, looking back, and knowing all of the facts, it is easy to judge leaders as having made a wise decision or having made a tragic choice if it resulted in failure. But to actually be there, and to have to make that choice yourself, what would you have done? History seems predetermined because we know what happened, and what the results ultimately were. But in real life, you have to make tough choices, often under duress, without knowing all of the facts. But since most of us don't really know the story of King Henry V, let me explain the scenario and then you tell me what you would have done. To unite the divisions within his kingdom and to earn the people's respect as a young leader, and to make a claim to the French throne, King Henry V successfully led an invasion into France as his first major campaign. After he landed a fleet of warships in Harfleur and successfully laid a siege to the town, King Charles of France offered a compromise. The French king would not give Henry the crown of France, but he would give him some small dukedoms, that is, small subregions within France, as well as the hand of his daughter, Catherine, in marriage, if King Henry V agreed to leave France peacefully. King Henry V, having risked a lot to get this far, turned down the offer and quickly began sweeping across France when he found himself at the Battle of Agincourt. At Agincourt, the dauphin arrived with an army 5 times the size of King Henry's army. If he were to fight them in battle, he would be outnumbered 5-1, which I don't need to tell you is not great odds. The dauphin had already insulted the king and was now openly taunting the king. You must meet with the dauphin to negotiate. What would you do if you were the leader? Here are your 3 options. The first option we'll call A, the safe option. When King Henry V arrived in Harfleur with a large fleet of warships, King Charles was surprised, so King Charles of France had offered a compromise. King Henry V is now at a disadvantage, so if he wants to renegotiate the compromise with King Charles of France, he will, of course, have to take some great losses. He is also here at great expense, and so this would be considered somewhat of a failure. This would, of course, though, be the safest option considering the odds. Second option, B, extreme personal risk. King Henry V could offer to settle the war in a one-on-one duel with the king's son, the heir to the throne known as the dauphin. He argued that it would save many Christian soldiers from having to spill their blood. But all of this can be avoided if they only fight one-on-one. This would also take away the advantage of having a larger army if they were to settle the war in this way. King Henry V had successfully put down Hotspur's rebellion using the same strategy, so it makes sense for him to try this once again here. It puts him at great personal risk, but it's not nearly as risky as going into all-out battle when his men are so outnumbered. Last and final option, option C, we call high risk, high reward, and this is, of course, to go to full-on war with the French army in the morning. As we already mentioned, King Henry V is both outnumbered 5-1 and he is an invading force. The invading force is always at a disadvantage militarily because the invading force doesn't know the terrain well, operating far from home is expensive and dangerous because resupply lines must be kept secure, the enemy will fiercely defend their homes because they have much to lose, and the enemy can retreat to familiar territory and easily prolong the war until they have even more advantage. King Henry's advisors suggested he negotiate even if he had lost the upper hand. They all agreed, except for his most trusted advisor, Sir John Falstaff. Falstaff offers an extremely risky military strategy. He believes it will rain, and if it does, then the men could gain the advantage by wearing light armor. But they will have to lead with a small heavy armored division as a decoy to hide their intentions. Then, assuming the Dauphin would commit the bulk of his forces, the light infantry would then have to fight in the mud. The hope here is that their advantage in maneuverability would outweigh the French advantage in numbers. So again, what would you do? Here are your 3 options. A, safely retreat and negotiate a surrender to try and recover some losses from this expensive failure. B, take some extreme personal risk by offering to fight the war in a duel with the Dauphin. And lastly, C, high risk, high reward option where you either fight at 5-1 odds of losing or employ an extremely risky strategy suggested by Sir John Falstaff. Leave us a comment below to let us know which option you would choose. And be sure to listen in next week or visit the website if you would like to know the result of your choice and see how they compare to King Henry V's choice. If you would like a transcript or links to more materials on today's lesson, feel free to visit www.bestclassever.org.
And that is the final segment for today. The best class ever from Sean Jusung McMillan. Thank you so much for everyone who's actually just helped out with these new segments. You guys are amazing and awesome. Just grateful and thankful that all of you people out there who, if you guys have more segments you want to add to this, go ahead and call me up. You know, we have Victory Rhymes, we have the MBTI, and we also have Best Class Ever. If you have any other ideas, I know someone's talking about sports. I would love to do a sports one. Honestly, I would love to do a sports one. But if anyone out there wants to do a sports report, I would love to hear it. Okay, so that is the end of today's Tuesday podcast. I hope you guys have an amazing and awesome day, and we'll see you guys tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and feel your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, you know. I'm on the Morning Star Drive, you know. I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, you know. I'm on the Morning Star Drive, you know.